Suck out the venom, it's really bloated. The human already did, and froze in shock. Mark was an experienced medic who had traveled across the galaxy, providing help to those in need. He had seen many strange things, but nothing quite like this. The alien planet he had landed on was beautiful, filled with towering trees and vibrant wildlife. But it was also dangerous. The creatures here could be deadly, and the people living here were constantly on alert. Mark's job was to keep them safe, using his medical knowledge to save lives. Today, Mark was called to an emergency unlike any he had faced before. He was sent to a small village deep in the forest, where one of the local aliens had been attacked by a venomous creature. The alien, named Tharok, was part of a species known for their strength and resilience, but even they were vulnerable to the venom of the creatures that roamed the wild. Mark was the only one who could help. When Mark arrived, Tharok was lying on the ground, his skin a pale green and his breathing shallow. His tentacle-like arms were twitching in pain, and he was sweating profusely. Mark immediately got to work, assessing the situation. He knew what had to be done. The venom had to be sucked out before it spread further. Mark opened his medical kit and pulled out a small, portable suction device. He had used it many times before in emergencies just like this. It was simple, effective, and fast. But as he approached Tharok's wound, something felt wrong. The venom wasn't acting like it should. Mark could feel his pulse quicken as he took a closer look. The venom wasn't just spreading quickly, it was bloated, filling Tharok's veins in a way Mark had never seen before. Mark hesitated. He had never faced anything like this. Was it some kind of new poison, or was it something else? He tried to push the thought out of his mind. He had no time for fear. Tharok's life was on the line. Mark set the suction device to work, placing it carefully over the wound. He began to pull out the venom, but it was unlike anything he had encountered before. The more he tried to remove, the more the venom seemed to resist, almost as if it was fighting back. Mark's hands froze. What was happening? Why was this venom so different? It wasn't just venom, it was something else. He had never felt so helpless in his entire life. For a brief moment, he simply stared at the venom, unsure of what to do next. Tharok's body twitched violently, and Mark realized he was running out of time. Mark took a deep breath and forced himself to focus. He had to think. He couldn't let this creature die. He reached for his communicator and called for backup, hoping the advanced technology the planet had could help. But as he waited for a response, something strange happened. Tharok's tentacles moved, his eyes opened slightly, and he groaned in pain. "Don't give up on me now," Mark muttered to himself. "Just hang in there." Mark wasn't sure if it was the venom's resistance or his own growing fear that was making his hands shake, but he kept working, determined to save Tharok. As he worked, he noticed something strange about the venom. It wasn't just affecting Tharok's body, it was changing him. Slowly, Mark could see his skin becoming more translucent, almost like it was turning into something else. The alien's veins were visible, glowing faintly with an eerie light. It was like the venom was altering him on a deeper level, something beyond just physical pain. Mark knew that if he didn't stop the venom soon, it would take over completely. He couldn't let that happen. He had to keep going. As he sucked more venom out, he felt a strange energy around him. It wasn't just the alien's body he was working on. It was like the planet itself was reacting to what was happening. Mark could hear the wind picking up outside, the trees swaying violently, as though the very environment was responding to the battle being fought within Tharok's body. Mark's communicator crackled to life, and he quickly pulled it to his ear. "Backup's on the way," the voice said, sounding distant. "We've detected a strange energy reading from the venom. It's unlike anything we've ever seen." Mark's heart raced. Strange energy? What did that mean? Was it some kind of new alien force? He couldn't help but feel like he was in over his head, but there was no turning back now. He pushed forward, using all his training to remove more of the venom. But the more he took out, the more Tharok's body seemed to change. The glowing veins spread, and the alien's breathing became faster and more erratic. Mark's mind raced. What was happening? What was this venom doing to Tharok? Suddenly, Tharok let out a loud gasp, and his body went completely still. Mark's heart stopped for a moment as he watched the alien's eyes glaze over. Had he gone too far? Had he taken too much venom out too quickly? Mark leaned in, checking Tharok's pulse. It was weak, but it was there. Tharok wasn't dead yet, but Mark knew this wasn't over. The venom had been so strange, so resistant. Mark had no idea what it was doing to Tharok's body. He couldn't afford to make a mistake now. He needed more information. The backup team had to hurry. Mark was no longer just fighting for Tharok's life. He was fighting against something much bigger than he had ever imagined. Mark stood over Tharok, sweat beading on his forehead. His hands were still shaking from the uncertainty he felt. The venom had been unlike anything he had ever encountered before. It wasn't just toxic. It seemed to be alive in a way, a force of its own. As he watched Tharok's body twitch and pulse, he couldn't help but wonder what kind of danger they were truly facing. The alien's body had started to glow faintly, its veins pulsing with an unnatural light. Mark hadn't seen anything like it in his years of treating venomous bites, and that made him uneasy. It wasn't just the venom. There was something deeper happening, something he couldn't explain. Tharok's eyes fluttered, and Mark quickly moved to his side. The alien's breathing was shallow, but he was still alive. Mark had to act fast. The backup team was on the way, but he couldn't wait for them. The venom was moving too quickly through Tharok's system, and with each passing second, the alien's condition worsened. Mark had always been confident in his medical training. He had dealt with all kinds of injuries and illnesses, from deep wounds to poisoned bloodstreams. But this was something new. He had read about strange viruses and parasitic infections on distant planets, but this venom felt different. It was more like a parasite than just a poison. It didn't just attack the body, it seemed to be controlling it. He grabbed his medical scanner and ran it over Tharok's body. The scanner hummed softly, its lights flickering. The readings it gave were baffling. The venom was not just spreading, it was manipulating the alien's biology. Mark could see the changes happening before his eyes. Tharok's muscles were twitching unnaturally, his skin becoming even more translucent. His tentacles were no longer moving with their usual grace. They jerked and spasmed, as though fighting against something inside him. The thought crossed Mark's mind. Was this venom part of a larger force, some kind of alien technology or biological weapon? The energy readings from the venom seemed to suggest it, and now, more than ever, he understood just how much danger they were in. Mark's thoughts were interrupted by the soft crackle of his communicator. "Mark, this is Varen," the voice on the other end said. Varen was part of the backup team that had been sent to help, but it sounded like he was already caught up in something. "We've detected strange energy readings coming from the venom. It's different from anything we've studied. It's acting like it's adapting to its host." "Adapting?" Mark repeated, glancing down at Tharok. The alien's tentacles were now twitching even more violently, as though the venom had somehow learned how to fight back. "What do you mean?" "I mean it's not just venom anymore," Varen explained. "We're looking at a complex bioenergy organism, Mark. It's not just a poison. The venom is alive, and it's communicating with Tharok's body. This is something far beyond just poisoning." Mark's heart raced. That made sense in a terrifying way. The venom was controlling Tharok's body, manipulating it in ways that were beyond natural poison. But what was its endgame? Why was it behaving this way? And most importantly, how could he stop it? Mark turned back to Tharok, whose body was beginning to shudder with greater intensity. He was struggling now, his mouth opening as though to speak, but no sound came. His eyes were wide with fear, the alien's usual calm demeanor now replaced with a kind of primal terror. "Tharok, stay with me," Mark urged, placing a hand on the alien's trembling shoulder. Tharok's skin was cold to the touch, but Mark refused to give up. He couldn't let him die, not when he could do something about it. He ran through his options in his mind. The venom needed to be neutralized, but how? He had the suction device, but it wasn't enough. And now, with the venom acting as some kind of sentient organism, Mark realized he needed more than just medical tools. He needed knowledge, understanding of what was happening inside Tharok's body. The voice from the communicator crackled again, but this time it was different. "Mark, you need to get to the temple," Varen said, his voice urgent. "We've found something important. We think it's tied to the origin of the venom." "The temple?" Mark repeated, confused. "What temple?" "The ancient ruins," Varen explained quickly. "The ones deep in the forest. There's a structure there that could be the key to understanding this venom. We've sent a team to secure it. If we can unlock its secrets, we might have a chance of stopping this." Mark didn't hesitate. "I'm on my way." He quickly gathered his things and prepared to leave, but not without one last glance at Tharok. The alien was still alive, but barely. Mark's heart sank. He knew they were running out of time. The trek to the temple was dangerous. The path was narrow, the air thick with moisture, and the forest around him was alive with strange sounds, some familiar, others utterly alien. Mark had learned to move quickly and silently through these woods, but today his thoughts were elsewhere. He kept thinking about Tharok, about the venom, about what it could mean. The further he moved into the forest, the more he could feel the strange energy in the air. It was almost as though the venom itself was calling to him, pulling him toward the temple, drawing him in. It felt wrong. He was certain the forest was alive with the same energy that had affected Tharok. It was as if the entire planet was a part of the venom's ecosystem, its very environment feeding and sustaining the deadly force. When he finally reached the ruins, the sight before him made him pause. The ancient temple, half covered in moss and vines, was both eerie and magnificent. It was clear that this place had been built long before any civilization had arrived on the planet. But now it felt like a forgotten place of power, its very stones steeped in mystery. Mark stepped inside cautiously, his boots making soft echoes as he moved through the darkened hallways. The air was thick with the smell of decay, but he could also smell something else, a sharp, metallic scent that made his skin crawl. He wasn't alone. The backup team was already inside, working to decipher the strange symbols that covered the walls. "Mark," Veron called from the far side of the room. "We found something." Mark approached quickly, his heart pounding in his chest. Veron was standing next to a stone pedestal, and on it was a small, glowing object. It seemed to hum with energy, its light pulsing in time with Mark's heartbeat. "We think this is the source," Veron explained. "Some kind of artifact that might explain the venom's origin. If we can unlock its secrets, we might have a chance." Mark knelt down beside the pedestal, his fingers brushing against the surface of the object. A shiver ran through him. This was no ordinary artifact. It was alive, like the venom itself. And just as he touched it, the room seemed to tremble, as if the very planet was reacting to their presence. The artifact glowed brighter, and Mark realized with a cold shock that this wasn't just about saving Tharok. The venom wasn't just a weapon. It was a living, breathing force that could change the fate of the entire planet. Mark's fingers trembled as he hovered over the glowing artifact. The light from it pulsed in sync with the strange energy that filled the room, and for a brief moment, Mark felt as though the artifact was alive, responding to his touch. It was clear now that this wasn't just an ancient relic. It was something far more powerful, something tied to the venom that had infected Tharok. Veron stood beside him, scanning the walls for any more information. "We need to figure out what this is," he said, his voice low, almost reverent. "This could be the key to understanding the venom. If we don't unlock its secrets, there's no telling what might happen next." Mark nodded, his mind racing. The venom was alive, no longer just a poison, but a complex organism with a purpose. And now, this artifact, glowing and pulsing with an energy Mark couldn't comprehend, was somehow connected to it. He stepped closer to the pedestal, his mind focused on the object. He could feel its pull, like it was calling to him. His heart beat faster, and he wondered what it would feel like to truly understand what was happening here. Could this artifact be the key to reversing the venom's effects on Tharok? He didn't know, but he had to try. The alternative was too dangerous. He couldn't let Tharok die not like this, not when he had a chance to save him. With a deep breath, Mark reached out and touched the artifact. The instant his fingers made contact, a surge of energy shot through him, so intense that he gasped. His vision blurred for a moment, and he had to steady himself against the pedestal. The room seemed to warp and twist, and for a fleeting moment, he felt as though he were not just in the temple, but somewhere else entirely. A different world, a different time. In that moment, images flashed in his mind. Strange symbols, ancient beings, a planet not unlike the one they were on, but different somehow. It was as though he had glimpsed a past life, a world long forgotten. He pulled his hand back quickly, heart racing. "What was that?" he whispered to himself. "Mark, are you okay?" Veron's voice broke through his dazed thoughts. Mark turned to find Veron staring at him, concern written on his face. I don't know," Mark replied, still trying to regain his bearings. "That artifact, it's not just a piece of history, it's alive, it's connected to the venom, I can feel it." Veron's eyes widened. "You're saying the artifact controls the venom?" Mark nodded slowly. "It's more than that, it's a part of the venom. Whatever this is, it's the source. The venom, it's alive, and this artifact is the key to it." Veron looked at the glowing object with renewed wariness. If the venom is alive, then that means the planet itself could be infected. It could be controlling the environment, the creatures, everything. Mark felt a chill run down his spine. If the venom was indeed controlling the entire ecosystem, that meant the planet itself could be a weapon, an ancient, living weapon designed to spread and take over everything. And if the artifact was the source of this force, it could mean that the venom was not just a biological phenomenon. It was a system, an organism that had been designed to conquer. Mark's thoughts were interrupted by a loud crack, like something breaking. He turned to see cracks running along the floor of the temple, glowing faintly with the same energy as the artifact. The whole room seemed to be alive, reacting to the presence of the object. "Mark," Varen said urgently, "we need to get out of here. Something's wrong. This place is reacting to the artifact." Mark didn't need any more convincing. They had already disturbed something ancient, and now the temple seemed to be coming alive as if it was aware of their presence. The walls hummed with energy, and the cracks in the floor spread like veins, glowing brighter with each passing second. "We can't leave yet," Mark said. "I need to understand what's happening. We need to figure out how to stop the venom before it spreads beyond Tharok." Varen looked skeptical but nodded. "Okay, but we need to hurry. This place is unstable." Mark's mind raced as he tried to think of a way to use the artifact to reverse the venom's effects. He could feel the pulsing energy of the object still resonating through his body, like a call he couldn't ignore. The venom had infected Tharok, but it was far from over. It was spreading, and Mark could sense that if they didn't act soon, it would consume everything on the planet. He reached out again, this time more cautiously, placing his hand on the artifact once more. As he touched it, the energy surged through him again, but this time he wasn't overwhelmed. Instead, the symbols on the walls seemed to glow brighter, and Mark felt a wave of understanding wash over him. The images from earlier returned, more vivid now. He saw the ancient beings, not just as shapes, but as living creatures, their eyes filled with knowledge. They had created the venom, and they had used it to conquer worlds, bending entire ecosystems to their will. Mark realized then that the venom wasn't just a weapon, it was a tool designed to reshape entire planets to make them into something new. The venom spread, altered the creatures, and brought the planet under its control. But the artifact was the key to stopping it. He didn't fully understand it, but he knew one thing for sure: if the artifact was destroyed, the venom would die with it. The two were inseparable. Mark turned to Varen. "We have to destroy it." Varen's eyes widened in disbelief. "Destroy it, are you sure? This thing could hold the answers we need." "I don't care about answers right now," Mark said, his voice steady. "This is bigger than us. We need to stop the venom from spreading before it infects the entire planet." Varen hesitated, but then he nodded. "Okay, what do we do?" Mark looked around the temple, his mind working quickly. He noticed a series of glyphs carved into the walls, symbols that seemed to correspond with the glowing cracks in the floor. The venom was alive, but the temple had been built to contain it, to control it. If they could activate the temple's ancient systems, they might be able to stop the artifact from unleashing any more power. "We need to activate the temple," Mark said, scanning the walls. "These symbols, they're the key to controlling the artifact. If we can unlock them, we can shut it down." He quickly moved to the wall, his hands tracing the glyphs. As he touched the symbols, the floor trembled and the cracks began to close. The energy in the room intensified, but Mark kept going, his fingers moving faster as the glyphs lit up one by one. The hum of the temple grew louder, and for a moment it felt as though the entire world was holding its breath. With a final touch, the last glyph activated, and the temple went silent. For a brief moment there was no sound. Then the artifact began to dim, its glow fading, and Mark felt the weight of the energy in the room lift. The venom's influence seemed to recede, as though the artifact's power had been cut off. But Mark knew it wasn't over. The venom was still inside Tharok, and now they had to race against time to make sure it didn't spread again. They had won a small victory, but the real battle was just beginning. Mark felt the weight of their small victory settle over him as the artifact's glow dimmed. The energy in the room had shifted, the oppressive force that had been building now receding, but he couldn't let himself relax. The venom was still inside Tharok's body, still threatening to consume him, and the temple, ancient as it was, had only been a temporary solution. Mark knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. Varen stood beside him, watching the now dormant artifact. "We did it," he said quietly. "The artifact's power is neutralized. The Venom's connection to the planet should be severed." Mark shook his head, not ready to celebrate just yet. "It's only a start. We need to get back to Tharok. He's still in danger." Varen nodded, his expression grim. "Right, the Venom is still in his system. And if it's as adaptable as we think, we might not have much time before it finds a way to spread again." Mark felt the familiar surge of urgency, his mind racing with possibilities. The artifact had been the source, the key to controlling the Venom, but the Venom was far more dangerous than they'd imagined. It wasn't just a poison. It was a living organism, capable of changing and adapting in ways that were still beyond their understanding. They had seen how it affected Tharok, how it altered him on a cellular level. The Venom was not just attacking him, it was transforming him. They needed to get back to the village as quickly as possible. Mark motioned for Varen to follow, and together they made their way back through the temple's winding corridors. The air felt lighter now, the strange energy from the artifact no longer pressing in on them. But Mark couldn't shake the feeling that they were racing against something far bigger than just the Venom. There was an ancient power at play, something that had been dormant for centuries and now, because of their interference, had started to wake up again. The trek back to the village was tense. As they moved through the forest, Mark's thoughts were consumed by the image of Tharok, lying unconscious, his body still twitching with the effects of the Venom. He could only imagine how the alien felt, helpless, trapped inside his own body as the Venom took over. It was a nightmare, one that Mark was determined to end, no matter what it took. When they arrived at the village, the sight that greeted them wasn't the one they had hoped for. Tharok was still unconscious, but his condition had worsened. His body had started to glow again, but this time it was different. The glow was darker, pulsing with an unnatural rhythm. His tentacles were moving erratically, no longer in sync with his body. The Venom was doing something new, something Mark couldn't understand. He rushed to Tharok's side, Varen close behind. Mark could see the alien's chest rise and fall with shallow breaths, his skin slick with sweat. His body seemed to be rejecting the Venom, but it was also being shaped by it, reshaped into something else. The transformation was happening faster now, and Mark knew that if they didn't act quickly, Tharok wouldn't survive. Mark pressed his hand to Tharok's side, trying to feel for any sign of stability, but there was none. The Venom had taken hold, and it was changing Tharok's very biology. His muscles were tightening, his bones stretching, as though the Venom was remaking him into something different, something alien. Mark didn't have time to waste. He had to find a way to stop the transformation before it reached its final stage. He knew the Venom had to be neutralized, but he wasn't sure how to do it. The artifact had been the source, but it had only neutralized the connection to the planet. The Venom was still alive inside Tharok, and it was evolving at a terrifying rate. "We have to do something," Varen said, his voice tight with worry. "We can't just sit here and watch him change." Mark nodded, his mind racing. There had to be another way, something they hadn't discovered yet. He needed to think, but the pressure was mounting. He couldn't afford to fail, not now, not when Tharok was so close to the edge. In that moment, a memory sparked in Mark's mind. He recalled something from his studies back at the medical academy, a theory about bioenergy and how certain organisms could be contained using energy fields. It wasn't much, but it might be their only chance. If they could create a field strong enough to contain the Venom, they might be able to stop the transformation and force the Venom to neutralize itself. But Mark didn't have the equipment he needed. The only thing they had was the basic medical kit, which wasn't designed for something as complex as this. He looked around the room, searching for something, anything, that could help. That's when he saw it. On the far side of the room, the village's healers had stored their supplies. It was a long shot, but there was a chance they had something useful. Mark quickly moved over to the shelf, searching through the collection of materials. He found what he was looking for, a set of bioenergy amplifiers used for treating more severe injuries, but they could also be adapted to create an energy field. Mark rushed back to Tharok's side, explaining the plan to Varen. "We're going to try to create an energy field around him," Mark said. "It's not going to be easy, but it might give us a chance to neutralize the Venom." Varen didn't hesitate. "Let's do it." Mark carefully placed the amplifiers around Tharok's body, attaching them to the points where the Venom seemed to be most concentrated. His chest, his arms, his legs. The amplifiers began to hum softly, sending pulses of energy into Tharok's body. Mark felt the temperature in the room drop as the energy field took shape. For a moment, nothing happened. The amplifiers pulsed softly, their light flickering with the rhythm of the venom inside Tharok. Mark held his breath, waiting for any sign that the field was working. Then slowly the glow around Tharok's body began to fade. The pulsing of the venom slowed, its chaotic rhythm becoming more controlled. Mark's heart lifted. It was working. The venom was being contained, but it wasn't enough yet. Mark had to push harder to create a stronger field to force the venom to stop spreading. He increased the power on the amplifiers, watching as Tharok's body reacted. The glow began to dim even more, and the venom seemed to recoil, retreating from the alien's body. Mark could see the transformation starting to reverse. The skin that had been stretched and twisted began to return to its normal color. The tentacles, once jerking violently, relaxed. Tharok's breathing became steadier, the shallow gasps turning into full breaths. It wasn't over yet, but Mark felt a surge of hope. They were winning. The venom was being pushed back, and Tharok was beginning to stabilize. "Is he going to make it?" Varen asked, his voice filled with disbelief. "We'll know soon," Mark replied, his eyes fixed on Tharok. The alien's body was still glowing faintly, but the worst of the transformation seemed to be over. Mark could only wait, his mind still racing. They had bought themselves some time, but the venom had proven to be a formidable enemy. Mark knew that they weren't out of danger yet. There was still a long road ahead, but for the first time, he allowed himself to believe that they might actually win this fight. Mark stood silently by Tharok's side, watching as the alien's body slowly returned to normal. The energy field had stabilized, and the once erratic pulses of the venom had diminished. Tharok's glowing skin had faded back to its usual deep green, and his tentacles had stopped their twitching. He still lay unconscious, but his breathing had become steady and deep. Mark could feel a weight lifting from his shoulders, for now they had bought Tharok time. Varen stepped up beside Mark, his eyes fixed on the alien. "It looks like the worst is over, for now." Mark nodded, but there was no relief in his expression. He knew this was only a temporary fix. The venom had proven itself to be far more than just a simple poison. It was alive, adapting, and Mark couldn't shake the feeling that they hadn't seen the last of it. The venom might be contained for the moment, but it could return, stronger and more dangerous than ever. They had only scratched the surface of what was really happening here. Mark walked over to the table where his medical kit sat, gathering his thoughts. He had to stay focused. He couldn't afford to be distracted by the growing anxiety in his chest. He needed to be methodical to stick to the plan. He turned to Varen. "We need to get to the root of this. If we're going to stop the venom permanently, we have to figure out how it spreads, how it adapts. We can't just keep patching it up. We need a solution." Varen crossed his arms and glanced at the unconscious Tharok. "I agree, but the artifact, the temple, what's its connection to all of this? It wasn't just a key to the venom, was it? There's more to it, something deeper." Mark didn't reply right away. He had been thinking about that for a while. The artifact had been the source of the venom's power, yes, but there was something else about it, something ancient, something tied to the very fabric of the planet itself. Mark's mind flashed back to the strange vision he had experienced when he first touched the artifact. The alien beings, the planet, the creation of the venom, it was all connected. But how and why? "I don't know," Mark said slowly, "but I feel like we've only uncovered a small piece of the puzzle. We need more information, more answers." Varen seemed to agree. "Then let's get to work. If the temple has answers, we need to find them. If there's any hope of curing Tharok and stopping this venom from spreading, we need to understand what we're up against." Mark felt a flicker of determination. There was no turning back now. He couldn't just sit by and watch the planet fall to this venom. He had to fight back, not just for Tharok, but for the entire world. "We'll need a team," Mark said, pacing the room. "The venom could be spreading through the environment. If it's as adaptive as we think, we might be dealing with more than just one infected creature. This could become a full-scale epidemic." Varen's eyes narrowed as he processed the information. "I'll contact the rest of the team. We'll need more hands to figure out the scope of this thing." Mark nodded, already feeling the urgency building in him again. Time was running out. The longer they waited, the more likely it was that the venom would spread. The energy in the room seemed to match his growing anxiety, the air thick with anticipation. "We'll need to search the temple thoroughly," Mark continued. If there's a way to stop the venom permanently, it's in there. We just need to find it. Varen was already pulling out his communicator. I'll get the team together. We'll meet you at the temple. As Varen stepped out of the room, Mark took a deep breath. He could still feel the weight of the artifact's energy in the back of his mind, a hum that seemed to echo in his skull. The artifact had a power that could not be ignored. It wasn't just a piece of history, it was a key to something much larger than he had anticipated. He glanced back at Tharok, still lying unconscious on the table. The alien's body had stopped glowing, and the once twitching tentacles had gone still. Tharok's life was no longer in immediate danger, but Mark knew the venom could return at any time. And if it did, they wouldn't be able to rely on makeshift solutions anymore. Mark grabbed his equipment, preparing for the next stage of their journey. They had to find out what the venom truly was, where it came from, and how to stop it once and for all. There was no room for mistakes. The lives of everyone on this planet, including Tharok's, depended on it. The team assembled quickly, and they made their way back to the temple, the air around them thick with tension. Mark felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him as they walked through the dense forest, their footsteps muffled by the thick undergrowth. The sky was overcast, the air heavy with the promise of a storm. Mark couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them, waiting for them to make a mistake. When they arrived at the temple, the structure loomed in front of them, ancient and imposing. The energy still lingered in the air, but it felt different now. The humming had stopped, the oppressive force Mark had felt before gone. But that didn't mean they were safe, not by a long shot. The team moved inside cautiously, their footsteps echoing in the empty halls. Mark's heart raced as they made their way deeper into the temple. He had no idea what they would find. Whatever they were about to uncover, it would change everything. They reached the central chamber where the artifact had once been. The pedestal was now empty, and the glow that had filled the room was gone. Mark walked up to the pedestal, running his hand over the smooth stone. He could still feel the residual energy, faint but present. I don't understand, Mark muttered. The artifact is gone, but the venom's still here. It's not just the artifact. There's something else in this place. Varen stood beside him, eyes scanning the room. Maybe the artifact wasn't the only source of the venom's power. Mark's mind began to piece things together. The artifact had been the key, but it hadn't been the only piece of the puzzle. There was more to this temple, more to the venom, that they hadn't discovered yet. They needed to search deeper. They needed to find the hidden truth about the venom and the ancient race that had created it. Let's keep moving, Mark said, his voice steady despite the uncertainty that gnawed at him. We can't stop until we know everything. They split up to search the temple, moving cautiously through the darkened halls. Mark's heart raced as he explored deeper, his mind racing with questions. What was the true purpose of the venom? What had the ancient beings created it for? And what would it mean if they didn't stop it? Hours passed, and just as they were about to give up, Mark stumbled upon something hidden in the shadows. It was an old, dusty journal, its pages worn with age. He opened it carefully, his eyes scanning the ancient text. The journal detailed the creation of the venom, its purpose, and the catastrophic consequences that had followed its release. The ancient beings who had created it had intended to use it as a weapon, a tool to control and reshape planets. But the venom had become too powerful, too uncontrollable. It had spread beyond their control, threatening the very fabric of their existence. Mark's breath caught as he read the final lines of the journal. There is only one way to stop it, the journal read. Destroy the source and the venom will die with it. Mark closed the journal, his heart pounding. The source wasn't just the artifact, it was the planet itself. They had to destroy the planet to stop the venom.